Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. It's great to have you with me today. I've got one email, and it is really going to frame the entirety of today's podcast because it's going to take some time to dig into. So let me read it to you, and then we'll get right started. It is from Carla V in Laguna, California. This is what Carla says. Dear Mr. Carpenter, years ago, under Al Davis, my father, long before he and my mother were married, and obviously I or my siblings were born, my dad worked as a security guard for the Raiders briefly. Because of that, and his fondness for Mr. Davis and how he treated him, he raised all of us to be Raider fans. I would consider myself a fan, probably, although I didn't much care about the team or the game during the off season. I didn't pay as much attention. However, when it was announced that the team going to Las Vegas, my brothers were extremely excited. So I got excited because they said it would give us the revenue to be able to be competitive every year, all the time. I started paying more attention once the move was announced. And then shortly after the move came, because of one of my siblings, I found your podcast and I listen every day. Thank you, Carla. Don't know if I would change the term from fan to diehard fan or if I was an observer before and am a fan now. I don't quite understand the exact definition, but I want to thank you for your podcast and the way that you teach both the Raiders and the game to us. It helps a lot of us who don't understand a lot, and it even has helped my brothers who do understand a lot. I have a question for you. You've often talked about trades and have briefly touched it, but can you explain to me what exactly would go into a Las Vegas Raiders trade? I work in the medical field, and so an explanation here would be greatly helpful. How do some trade rumors get out? Some don't and just happens. Can you just explain the entirety of the trade process? Carla V and Laguna. Carla, I thought this was a great email. And I got to tell you, so it was passed up to me from a member of my staff. And then Shannon read it and told me, you got to answer this one. And it was the answer's too long for our weekly question and answer article. So I wanted to literally give an entirety and take everyone behind the scenes of the anatomy of what a Las Vegas Raiders trade or anatomy of a NFL trade really looks like. So thank you, Carla. I appreciate it. Now, excuse me. Let's get right in and dig right in on what does that look like. So, a couple of things that most fans, even diehards, don't know is that 90% of the teams, all of the successful ones, know as much as humanly possible about every other team's roster as they do about their own. This is why you'll hear me when we talk about practice squad. Can this guy be hidden? So a lot goes into that. They literally have a person who is the director of pro scouting who oversees every other NFL team, every person on the practice squad, everywhere on the roster. Where did the Raiders or the current people in charge of Raiders, like John Spytek came from the Bucks, where did they have this player graded when they came out in the draft? What do they think about where this player has, been before? So I'll give you an example. I'm not going to name the player of the team. I'm not trying to make anyone look bad, but to answer Carlos' question, I knew a guy that a team was very, very high on, and he went to a team that didn't use him the way this team really liked, and they didn't think the team had good coaching at that position at all. Yes, they scout coaches. Person goes to another team that wanted to use them the right way, but still terrible coaching. So this team was like, hey, we got to get this guy. We think we've got the coaching and the system. They went and got him for a song and dance, gave him, I think it was a 3-year, but it may have been a 2-year deal for nothing. And the guy exploded and became an all pro. And everyone's like, oh, he just needed to mature. No, he needed to be in a team that understood exactly who he was, what he was. So good scouting kept him on the radar. And when they could go get him at cheap, they did. That's how you build championship rosters. Everyone thinks you build championship rosters with the Max Crosbys, and you have to have those. Or with the Brock Purdy's. Look at how good San Francisco was when they were paying Brock Purdy nothing. Literally nothing. And so you've got to have those good players at cheaper contracts to be super successful in this league. So when you understand that a team has maximum knowledge about everybody's roster and practice squad and every free agent, I mean, they have boards and they understand. So all of a sudden, they're looking for a will linebacker. And they already know, okay, XYZ team may have too many wills. So are we watching for them to cut somebody? Or do we consult and say, hey, is this player available for a trade? That's how they do that. They're watching practice squads. They know everybody available. So let's say they have there's a free agent available, and they think, well, our best option for this position is a 1 or 2 year stopgap. There's nobody out there that we think we can get or we can develop that's a long-term answer. Well, we can go get this free agent for a lot less than a trade here. Or, well, we can go get this free agent for cheap, but we can go over here and get this guy. We think he's a long-term answer. So most people don't understand the amount of knowledge and accumulated wisdom that each team has on every other team's roster. Now, there are a couple of teams that are cheap. You can probably figure out who don't have that extensive knowledge. And so you got guys in your building that are poring over every single preseason game, highlights. That's why teams don't let, media shoot certain parts of practice. Because if we get to shoot it, we'll put it up on social media and teams get to see that. Another reason is maybe they're doing this, where we can't discuss changes or whatever, is because they don't want us to give away schematics. That makes complete sense to me. That's not illogical to me. And so they know everything that's out there. They're aware of every single thing that's out there. Now, I'm going to give you two quick examples of this. A few years ago, the Raiders had a video that they put out, and it showed something in particular. I'm not going to say what. I'm not trying to give away anything, but it showed something. And when I say that, it's not really the player because it was a few years ago. I don't want anyone within the organization to feel bad. But they put something out, and I get a call from a friend of mine who works at a scout at another team. Now, let me just make this very clear. I would never betray my friends, and I would absolutely never betray the Raiders. I wouldn't do that. It's not integrous. I just and you know what? My friends wouldn't ask me to. So when someone would ever ask me, I just make a mental note, we're clearly not friends. Just like Sheldon White, I don't pick up the phone and ask him secrets about the Steelers. We just don't even have that discussion. Why? Because he works for the Steelers. I know him, I know his integrity, all of that. So follow me. But the Raiders had put something out on social media or YouTube, one place, and there was something in the background. That's why now you watch the videos, they're usually very, very tight. And a scout called me and goes, listen, I know you're not going to give me any secrets, but I'm going to send you a video. So he sends me a video and says, it looks like this guy is injured. And he goes, do you think that's accurate? To which I just said to him, I'm not going to answer that question. Now, in case you're wondering, the player was injured. And they were interested in that player. And so they kind of moved on a little bit. Okay, not a big deal. And excuse me, the player was not injured, excuse me. But they moved on because they thought the player looked injured. All he was doing was just standing there. What I don't even know why they thought that, but whatever. but they're constantly scouring every piece of information, every single one, literally every single one. I'll get calls, "Hey, do you think this guy's gonna be available?" And if I think he is, I'm like, "Yeah," that because that's not negative to the Raiders, or, "No, I don't think he is." Anyways, but that is constantly going on. It is constant roster evaluation of every eligible player that can go be signed right now as a free agent or every player on a team. Then they're constantly breaking down teams. They know each team's weaknesses. So I'll never forget one time I was covering a team and they were going into a draft. And I mentioned to them, "Are you concerned about XYZ team taking ABC player?" They said, "No, they've got a good guy there, but he's older and expensive. But man, they got two really good ones behind him. Don't see why they would take him." So as the draft process was going up, they eliminated that team for that player. Again, you don't do that if you don't have extensive knowledge of every team, every coaching staff, everything. It is a humongous deal. So, as a trade begins to develop, now maybe somebody calls Spytech that has a relationship with him. Maybe he makes the call. Then maybe it's somebody that he has no relationship with, but they're like, "Hey, we're interested in this guy on your roster. Is he available?" No. Now, there are some players that just aren't available. I have been told by some of the best general managers in NFL history, both current and former, that every player is available. Just what are you willing to spend for them? So the answer is always yes. Then there are some, no, not available. All right. So then, well, yeah, but well, what do you think it'll cost? Well, you're only allowed to give 3 years of ones, so we want six. So you better go get three more ones from somebody else. And that's basically he's not available talk. Or if the Chiefs called and said, "We're interested in this guy." Well, if you're not trading Patrick Mahomes, we're not interested. Okay, we're not, it's over. Then they start to talk about, well, we don't want to trade this person, but we would be XYZ compensation. And usually the team shoots very, very high and trying to get as much as they can. It's typical negotiation. And then a lot of times they're like, "Hey, we may be interested in this guy. What do you think of him on your 53?" "Yeah, he's going to make our 53, but he would be available." Okay. So they know that. So then they think, "Okay, you know what? I'm not going to make the trade right now, but if there's an injury or this guy doesn't perform, I know what it will cost me to go get this guy." Those conversations are happening regularly, all the time. They're knowing. Then as the preseason gets going, teams have injuries. So let's say John Spytek's sitting in his office. He gets a weekly report on other teams, whatever. "Hey, XYZ team has had this injury at guard. We got a plethora of good guards." He may pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I got some guards here. Are you in the market?" Not saying he will. I'm saying he might. This is all different scenarios of trades that I'm aware of. I'll give you an example. I remember a time that Cleveland was way down on centers. And then I think they had two centers in, they were already down on centers and had two centers injured in a preseason game. And the next day, a team with three good centers called. And Cleveland, like, "No, we got another guy we're going to try to develop into one." But they called to just kick the tires with Cleveland on a trade. So that all of that goes into a trade. Okay, now there may be a player that a GM says, "I don't necessarily need this player, but he is an upgrade." Every good general manager is constantly looking to upgrade his roster. This is why you say nobody is never available. What are you willing to pay for them? So let me give you an example. I'm going to go to baseball, but it's true in football. Okay. Years ago, the Detroit Tigers had a young pitcher from Lansing, Michigan, who was an up and coming minor league star, and everyone thought he's going to be a really, really good player. His name was Johnny Smoltz. Shout out to you, Johnny. Great guy, good friend, good guy. And everybody in Michigan was excited about Johnny Smoltz. He was from Lansing. He was a Michigan kid, went, was at Waverly and all at Catholic Central. Great kid. But the Tigers felt like they were one pitcher away from winning a World Series. So they traded Johnny Smoltz for a pitcher by the name of Dole Alexander. Now, Dole was a good pitcher, very good pitcher, but at the end of his career, not a guy you're going to have for 30 years or 20 years like a Johnny Smoltz. But their belief was, hey, if you get a World Series, you can't ignore a World Series ring. So you're willing to gamble the future for the present. Here's my point. And it worked out for both Atlanta and Johnny Smoltz and the Tigers that won the World Series with Dole. Here is my point. You may be sitting there today and you're a team that says, okay, we're rebuilding. And we got an older player, but a great player who's still good. But this team is willing to overpay us and give us big futures for that guy today. And he may be a very popular player, a great player. Let's assume let's say that Max Crosby's sitting here in year 12 of his contract. I mean, year 12 of his career, and he's still playing great, which I expect him to be at year 12. But hey, you know what? There may be just a year or two left on the tires with Max. So somebody's willing to trade you a great player. No, it's Max Crosby. I'm not advocating a trade. I'm just using this as an example. And you may say, okay, fans love him. We love him. He's always going to be a Raider. But man, this makes us better for the next 12 years. And XYZ team thinks they're a edge rusher away from a Super Bowl. San Francisco, and for whatever reason, the guy's name just eludes me. Charles Haley had a Charles Haley, a really good defensive guy. But, they were wondering what to do. Well, the Cowboys ended up with him because they felt like, hey, let's sign this guy. He's expensive, but let's sign this guy and bring him in. He's a hired gun for a couple of years. I understand that's not exactly apples to apples, but it's the mindset. So that goes into a trade. Where are we at? Where's this other team at? This other team may not be willing to trade a player, but we know that they're not there in the future. So what if we sell them some future? You see this a lot in baseball. You see it a lot in hockey. Occasionally in basketball, but you don't see it as much in football. So that all goes into an anatomy of a trade. So now let's assume that two teams have interest and the trade is coming to fruition. Okay, so they're negotiating. Now, sometimes you're going to bring an agent in. Now, one of the worst ways that information leaks is through agents. Okay. I had a general manager one time that says, if I ever start trade talks, unless a guy is a no trade, I tell the team I'm trading with, if you're going to tell an agent, I'm not interested. Now, why would agents not always have a reason to talk, but why would they talk from time to time? All right. Maybe their client doesn't have a no trade clause and they don't want to be traded to that team. So they'll leak to certain media. Hey, XYZ team's trying to trade for my guy and he doesn't want to play there. He'll retire. He doesn't want to be there. Or maybe they know their fan base isn't going to be happy with it. Or a player on that roster isn't going to be happy. I'll tell you a great story. I'm not going to tell you the player, but I had an agent tell me this story. I was out to dinner with an agent one time and a GM, both friends of mine. And this is a great story. And it wasn't the same team, but it was a different team. But this agent was telling me the story. So there was a team that had two players that were close, but their wives were like sisters. I mean, sisters. The one player was a good player. The other player was a star on the team. So team A is trying to trade this player, the star's friend, and their wives are super close. The agent leaks it. The wife of the star goes crazy. The star goes crazy and goes in and goes, "Hey, what is this?" And the team's like, "Oh, we don't know where that stuff comes from. That isn't happening." And the deal got killed. It was a great move by the agent. So agents are not, they just don't talk like Swiss cheese and give everything up, but they will absolutely give up information if it's beneficial. I have learned things multiple times from agents, multiple times. I have learned things from agents who don't have a player involved in the trade, but they think the trade would negatively impact their client. I've had this happen several times. I'll give you an example. I knew a team that was thinking about trading a player and at one position and bringing in a guy at another. And bringing in the guy at another position would have affected one of this agent's clients. So they leaked it out there, hoping to kill it. Now, sometimes you get it leaked out because agents want to get it out there when they get massive deals. Anything that can make the agent look good is usually from the agent. And that's not a slam or talking poor about agents. They want to be able to go to the next guy saying, "Look, I just got this guy the largest contract in NFL history," or "I just got, this is the biggest deal for this position," or whatever. I know an agent who one time in trying to sell himself to players of a particular team would say, "I've gotten alumni of your school X hundreds of millions of dollars in deals." So you look at that. Sometimes the team has reason. So let me give you an example. I knew a player that was not performing well, and there was a team actively trying to trade for him. And I had a GM call me and just say, "Hey, you can leak this out." Okay, I will. Now, that player found out, that player was mad. His wife liked the community he lived in, his kids liked the community. The agent calls, "Hey, Hondo just report out there that you guys are talking about a trade." "Well, we kind of are." "Why?" "Well, his effort hasn't been great. We think there's more effort, and clearly we're not getting out of him." And the player comes in and the agent comes in, "No, this is not going to happen." And they got it fixed. So they used that. It was a legitimate trade, but they used that. Those things all go into an anatomy of a trade. So how does it leak out? Those types of ways. Now, there are other ways it leaks. So once a deal is getting either consummated or super close, they then send in the paperwork to the league. Some trades have to be approved. There's people within the league who leak. Oh, come on. Oh, yes. There's people within the league who leak. Absolutely. I know for a fact. I know I've had it happen. And I know several people at the league. And I remember one time a thing came out. Neither team wanted it out. The agents at that point, I don't think the agents even knew. They may have known, but the agents weren't going to really want this out there. And it got out. It was huge news in a slow period. I called my buddy. I go, "Huh? So I think someone from the league's been yapping." He goes, "Oh yeah, somebody has. The teams are mad." I'll just say mad. That's another way an anatomy of a deal gets revealed. So once the deal is consummated, then they send in the paperwork to the league, who approves it, and then by that time it's out, it gets leaked. But then usually a day or two later, the teams will announce it. So that's the anatomy of a trade. There are so many different things that go into it. The best teams know everything about everybody. The best teams know the best about everybody. Now, I'll tell you another way that teams will get information. So I'll give you an example. I know an agent who I respect and admire. And if my child were looking for an agent, I would want my kid to hire this guy in a minute. I think he's a tremendous agent. All right. So other teams will call him and just say, "Hey, I know you represent this guy. Can you tell me how he's doing on this team?" And that agent's going to give a good report, which he should, by the way. That's not immoral. And he's going to tell you what. So I'll give you an example. This agent is at practice watching one of his clients get some, film on him on his phone, and he sends it to another general manager. "Hey, my guy's looking good. I think he'd look really good in your system. You should take a look." And that's sometimes how anatomy of a trade starts to work, because sometimes they don't know everything on other teams because they're not getting to watch practice. So agents will give information to teams as well. Remember, they're trying to keep interest in their player. I'll give you a great example. I knew a player who had zero interest in things of faith. I'm not going to say whether it was Christian faith, Muslim faith, Buddhist faith, whatever, but he had no interest in any faith whatsoever. And he was on a team that faith was really, really important to. And so he wanted to go do things that you would traditionally not considered a bunch of married guys of faith that they would want to do in their off time. They had they just wouldn't do it. So he lets his agent know, "Hey, these are all good guys, but I don't really have any friends here. I'd love to get traded." And the agent started that process. I'll give you another one. I knew a guy who was on a team where most of the guys, every guy at his position, were all married with kids. So their wives were all friends, their kids were all friends, there was birthday parties, and nobody excluded them. They tried to include them. In fact, their kids called him uncle. But he's like, "Man, I just don't fit." And everyone wants to work at a place that they fit, especially when it's a football season where you're there all the time. And so he literally just didn't have any friends on the team. It wasn't that the team had nothing to do with faith. It wasn't that the team wasn't friendly. He just didn't fit the dynamics of the team. Tells his agent, they worked something, and it worked out. That's why when you talk about locker room dynamic, it's okay. I know sometimes, all right, is this person going to fit? We're a strong team of faith or not a strong team of faith. I knew a guy one time, no, I'm not talking about Max, who had uh, worked very hard to get sober. After his sophomore year in college, he checked himself into rehab, and he was on a team with a bunch of hard drinkers, not bad guys, just like to go drink every night. And he just didn't fit, not because they were bad guys and he was the good guy, or he was a bad guy and it was just, it didn't fit because he didn't fit the culture of the locker room. I know a guy one time that he was raised Quaker. I think it was, no, not Quaker. Yeah, maybe it was Quaker, but it was a small Christian sect. And he didn't play cards. He didn't want anything to do with cards, nothing like that. And these guys would just play gin rummy or euchre. Well, probably not euchre, but because that's more of a Michigan type game, but it's just one I play a lot, but whatever. And so he just didn't play cards, and the guys all played cards, and and you may say, well, that just seems dumb. It does. But remember, you're dealing with 22-year-old kids, some of them up to 35, but you got a lot of young kids. I knew a guy one time that dated a player's sister and didn't abuse her or anything like that, but just wasn't good to her. And it happened to be a star player on the team and a very popular player on the team. And after word got out about how he treated her, because everybody liked her, it wasn't her brother that told, he got moved out. So there are so many things that go into locker room dynamics, all of that stuff. And so when you understand all of that, that literally, Carla, is the anatomy of an NFL trade. Sometimes it's need, sometimes it's not need, but this team needs to get rid of a player for whatever reason so we can get them a little cheaper, all of that. And that's the anatomy of an NFL trade. I hope that helps you all, and I really appreciate you. Hope I listen. It is hot all over the country. Luckily, in Vegas, the humidity is not like the rest of the world, but I know where I'm from in Michigan, it's in the hundreds with 100% humidity or 95% humidity, but it's everywhere from the East Coast to the West Coast, all over. It's hot. So make sure you're staying cool, drink a lot of water. God bless you all. We'll see you tomorrow.